Children are confusing. And how much more confusing when you see them not read on time, while they still seem to be understanding at a much higher level than their peers. What are you to do? Today's guest, Lynne Roe, shares her story of struggle and fabulous strategies that helped her son become successful along the way. If you've wondered about reading and teaching your kids to read, this will be a very helpful episode for you. Does your child have a speech-language delay and you really want them to talk? Do difficult behaviors derail home life and you know the frustration is a communication struggle? Does your child see a speech therapist and you wonder, what do they do and how can I help? If these or similar questions are in your mind, this podcast is for you. Hello, my name is Dinalynn Rosenbusch. I am a speech-language pathologist that has worked with children from birth to 21 for 3 decades. And in my classrooms, I see you wanting to connect with the heart of your child, but their speech and language skills create a barrier. So if you have a kiddo that has difficult behaviors, needs to expand their language or learn to say speech sounds, and maybe even receives speech therapy, stay tuned, because in this podcast, you will learn how to use your daily life as a tool to communication practice and how to do that practice. You will become confident knowing you are making the difference you want to make. And you will hear success stories of parents who have navigated these struggles already. We'll do this all while focusing on building deep, meaningful connection and confidence in your kiddo. So grab a cup of coffee along with a notebook and pen. It's time to speak in the way your child's brain understands. And that is the language of play. Hey listeners, I have been delighted by the number of you that have commented on the webinar. I'm thankful that you found it helpful, and the requests for me to do it again have come in. So I will be planning that, though it won't be in this next month because I have a number of wonderful family commitments. But I will start planning for July. I don't have a date yet, but I'm very honored that you are eager to learn more about what it is that can impact our children's ability to listen, especially in the presence of a communication disorder of some sort, or maybe just a talking delay. We know that our children have a desire to please their parents, but sometimes it doesn't look like that. Knowing the factors that can get in the way help us as parents to be patient and lovingly get them through those moments where disobedience might not be disobedience. In the meantime, if you would like more information or want to look at next steps, email me at hello@thelanguageofplay.com and we can have a conversation about your kiddo and what you can do to help them improve their listening, their speech, and language. Now let's get into today's episode with Lynne Roe. Hello, listeners. Lynne Roe is here today as a successful parent. She has a child with dyslexia and dysgraphia, but a very high IQ. Well, how does that happen? Lynne, thank you for coming to talk with us about this phenomena. People think that you're welcome. Sometimes people equate the ability to read with intelligence, and sometimes it appears that way. But your story's beautiful, and I want you to just take the story and tell us about your child and children, because it affects more than one.
Yes, it does affect more than one. So I recognized that my son was a little different when he was about 4 or 5. But of course, the schools don't always say, okay, there's a problem. They just say just a little delayed. But I knew that he was a little different. So I did have him tested right away, even though the school wasn't prepared to do it, which is actually the first lesson I have for parents is if you think there's something going on with your kid, there probably is, because you know your child better than anybody else. And so if you really think there's a challenge that your child has, take the time to find out. Even if the school says, no, let's give it time, you need to find out. So anyway, we had him tested. And
I love that you're telling parents to trust their gut. I want to just highlight that. You're telling parents to trust their gut. Sorry to interrupt, but that's just so important. And I love that you said it. Okay, keep going.
Yes, it's critical. He struggled to learn to read. It was, I don't know, third grade maybe before he really could read. So up until then, I was able to get the school to give remedial services to teach him how to read, but he was absolutely a very, very intelligent kid. And this is actually a fairly common combination that they see, is that somebody can be very bright and yet have challenges with learning. So what ended up happening as he was growing, and for many years, the school would do the remedial, teach him how to read and things. And then I would work with him outside of school on things that were actually leveled up from his grade level. So grade level, let's say grade level 3, he was doing grade level 1 reading and writing. But at home, we were reading to him, and he was then dictating back to us. He could write a book report on something I read to him, because he couldn't read it yet, but intellectually he could understand it all. So he was probably at a 5th or 6th grade level there.
And comprehension.
And comprehension, but he was at a 1st or 2nd grade level in his actual ability to learn. And if you don't give a child enough of the intellectual stimulation, that's when they start to get in trouble. If they can handle more intellectual stimulation, then they're bored in the classroom. They're bored. And especially my kid, who was in 3rd grade and he was only able to work at a 1st and 2nd grade level, right? He was definitely not being intellectually stimulated. Without giving him extra, he would have gotten into trouble because he'd been so bored in the classroom. But this kept him intellectually stimulated while he was catching up with the learning.
That's wonderful that you saw it, that you were able to run down that path and help him. Yeah. Sometimes that's so confusing. I'm so glad that you had that gut feeling and that you listened to your gut. Yeah. Because when we look at our children at a 1st grade level, we'll start to treat them like a 1st grade level, but yet you're knowing that he's not at a 1st grade level. He's functioning much higher. And so the words then would be decoding, would be the reading skill that was at 1st grade level, but comprehension was the reading skill that was or the listening skill, I should say, that was at the 5th grade level or 6th grade, whatever it was.
He was probably even higher than that. For when they tested him, he was actually at like the 97th percentile or 98th percentile in the comprehension in his intellectual abilities. But
it would be only listening comprehension, not reading comprehension, right?
Right. So reading comprehension and those skills were down around 2%. So it was this giant,
this gap.
Disconnect.
A big gap. We call that a discrepancy.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a big gap. And it makes it confusing to figure out how to qualify somebody too. Did he actually end up then qualified as special education to get those services?
Yes, he did. Yes, he did, which was good in some ways. He got the support. In other ways, not so good, because he was confused. Am I really one of these kids who doesn't know much? Or am I a kid who knows a lot? And so that, as a parent, is hard to navigate as well. You have to really work with your child to help them understand that just because they can't read doesn't mean that they're not intelligent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's the way many disabilities are. And a way a person can appear on the outside when they're functioning differently. It's easy to assume that there isn't intelligence there, but it's so not the case.
So not the case. So not the case. Yeah.
How did the rest of your family manage all of that? Sounds like it was just you and your son, but I know you've got more.
I do. I have 4 kids. So he was one of the 4. And that was challenging, actually. He required more of my time. And so in some ways that was good, because the others became a little bit more independent. But I can remember him asking his sister to help him learn to read, to help him with understanding some of the how do I pronounce these letters and that kind of thing. So they also got involved with helping him move along.
How old is he now?
He is 30.
And how does he function now?
He's fully functioning and fine, but still, dysgraphia is still an issue. So he doesn't write at all. He uses a keyboard,
Okay,
but
so
his
for
writing,
listeners, dysgraphia is one of those jargon terms. Would you like to tell our listeners about dysgraphia?
yeah, it means that he was not able to get the idea of what he was trying to write from his head onto paper.
Okay, graphia meaning the graphic, the letter shapes that we're making with our hands. Dys meaning disability, dysfunction, or difficult. Yeah. So difficult to make what you know in your head come out your fingers.
Exactly. Exactly right.
In letters, particularly. Is he able to draw?
Not really.
Mhm.
Yeah, he doesn't have much of that at all. But he's actually very creative. So, but it all comes out in different ways, not in writing, not in drawing, but it'll come out on the computer because he can use his fingers with the keyboard.
Sure. Is he creative in other ways too? I suspect he is.
There.
Like maybe sculpting or carpentry or, some other way that he's creative.
No, not with anything that uses his hands.
That's interesting, isn't it?
It is.
And I love that the rest of your family got involved to help also along the way.
Yeah, it's true. It was very nice that they were involved, and they still support each other, which is kind of amazing to me that, they're all in their late 20s, early 30s, and yeah, they support each other still.
That's great. Do you have grandchildren yet?
Not yet. Not yet.
Okay. Yes. I was just wondering if this is showing up with the next generation. But now that your radar is on, what would you tell, let's say you notice something with a grandchild, which is like maybe one of our listeners.
Yeah.
What would you tell your children if they're wondering something? Why doesn't my child like to do this with the pencil? Why doesn't my child seem to be interested in reading these words or whatever?
Yeah.
What would you say to your children about your grandchild?
One would be, most likely this child will eventually get it and learn it, but will need some support. And if there's any questions, then you need to find out, get the testing done if that's what it takes to find out, but spend the time to find out what it is your child needs. And you have to advocate for your own children. They can't advocate for themselves. And the schools did not want to even test my son. So I actually had him tested on my own. But once they saw the results of the test, they were like, oh, yeah, he gets support. So don't just go with what the school necessarily says. They may be right. They sometimes are, and they sometimes are not. So find out for yourself. And don't wait too long. I'm not one of these people who says, oh, rush right away to make a change. Sometimes it's just a couple of months or something, and then they get it. But don't wait too long because you don't want your child to fall way behind. And there's also emotional issues that happen when a child is very bright and missing some of these capabilities because they know that they're different and other kids know that they're different. And so they also have to have some emotional support to figure out, how do I manage what other people are seeing in me?
Those are 4 really, really good tips. I'm going to highlight them because it's important. Is that all right? I wrote them down. So first you would say, find out. Maybe it's not an issue, but find out. Go test. Do what you need to do. If your gut says something's wrong, follow that intuition. Find out. The second thing is to advocate for your children, always, because they can't, you do. And also, I'm going to add to that, if somebody doesn't really know how to advocate, they talk to people like you or me, or many of the other people on my podcast. That's what we do. We can help parents know how to advocate. And the third thing is, don't wait too long. You want to give them a little time, but don't wait too long. And the fourth thing you said was emotional support, enough that they can manage the situation that they're in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you for making it so plain and real.
You're welcome. You're welcome.
Yeah. What are you proud of the most on how you got through that situation? When you think back to the struggle, what are you proud of?
When I think back on it, I think over time, over the course of his whole schooling years, we'd work on one thing and then he'd get tired and I'd get tired and we'd kind of stop. But then I'd recognize we have to keep going. And so it's a matter of give yourself a break, give each other a rest if that's what you need, but then don't give up completely. Keep plugging away at it because eventually you'll get there. But sometimes people get to the point where, oh my God, this is so much work dealing with my son. all of that. It's really hard as a parent. It is. So give yourself a little break, say, and your child probably needs a little break too. Okay, we've learned this much of it. We'll take a little break for a month or two and then go back and keep going.
So you must have felt like this was a cycle. You remembered to come back and remembered to come back. Is that what you're saying you're proud of?
Exactly. Yes.
So I bet that the relationship that you built through that struggle is strong. Am I right to assume that?
I do have a strong relationship with my son. Yes.
That's so cool. And unfortunately, it's the hard things that bind us, but it also is that silver lining for having gone through the hard thing.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right. Exactly.
That's so good. Now, is there anything you'd like to tell me about the other parts of the family? You told me about your daughter helping him. How about extended family? What did they do?
Some of the family just didn't understand, and they were kind of hands off, like he's an unusual kid, a strange kid. I'm not quite sure how to deal with him. And others of the family were really supportive. And that was kind of hard when some of them were, to the point where they'd even forget a birthday or something, right? But not forget the other kids' birthdays. But you also have to think about, okay, the family's not sure how to handle it. They know that this child is different. And it wasn't until he became an adult and some of them started talking to him and said, wow, he is brilliant. He's a really smart kid. But before that, they didn't get a chance to get to know him. They didn't take the time to get to know him.
They shut him out.
They did. Yeah. They did shut him out. Yeah.
It was a loss for everybody.
It was.
When we have people in our family that are a bit quirky, we need to remember to include is so important, and it goes miles.
Yeah. I also found that most of the family really didn't understand how to interact. Like they didn't understand why he did things that he did the way he did, why he didn't, why he was struggling. And so they didn't know what to say or what to do or what to expect or anything, or even what he was capable of. That was hard for people.
Yeah, that makes sense. And then they slow down their interaction.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right.
I'm glad that you learned how to be an advocate for your child. I'm glad that you stood up for him and helped him to become a successful adult. How's he handling that now? Does he hold resentments or not so?
No, with a few people, but not with most. There's a couple of people that he's feeling a little resentful towards, but most people, no. He's happy to be around most everybody.
That's so good. Yeah. So you are a successful parent, and you have every reason to be proud of yourself for getting through these kind of hardships, because this is real. This is just real life. And it's a lot of people that have stuff like this. So I really appreciate you coming on and telling your story.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hey parents, I hope you found this episode helpful. If so, would you please take 30 seconds and share it with a friend who also lives or works with children? I would really appreciate it if you would leave a quick review for the show on Apple Podcasts. I read every review, and it lights me up to know that this show is making a difference. Then come join my Facebook community, where you'll meet other parents who are dedicated to helping their children grow too. You'll find the link in the show notes. Thank you for joining me. Now it's time to go. Let's pop our kiddos in the strollers and go look around outdoors and see what we have to talk about.